Chapter 1241. Genie. The light emitted by the lamp's core was extremely viscous, like water that had been infused with quite a bit of sugar. It spewed out, forming a distorted and blurry golden figure. This figure instantly occupied the crimson star representing the hermit, cutting off his ability to sense Catalea. Sitting at the end of the long bronze table, Klein's eyes widened as a thought subconsciously flashed across his mind.
As expected of a sealed artifact labeled 005.
Although the serial number of Grade 0 sealed artifacts was usually based on the order of the time the Orthodox churches obtained or understood them, it had to be known that this set of rules was officially established after the 7 churches truly ruled over the world, which was the late 4th epoch and early 5th epoch. Back then, most Grade 0 sealed artifacts had already appeared, and they had been learned of or obtained by the Orthodox churches. This resulted in a situation where the ones with smaller serial numbers being Grade 0 sealed artifacts that were more powerful, terrifying, and unimaginable. Then, the rest were labeled based on the order of appearance. In addition, although it wasn't wrong to say that an item was more powerful the more ancient it was, for an item from the first epoch that the ancient gods were unable to affect, it definitely meant that even deities didn't fully comprehend their secrets. This way, the smaller the number was, the more terrifying the Grade 0 sealed artifact was. Of course, based on this rule, the Grade 0 sealed artifacts with higher serial numbers weren't necessarily worse than the first 10. Perhaps it was simply because they were discovered or obtained by the church at a later date. Without any numbers left for them, they could only be serialized. Just as a thought flashed through his mind, the golden figure's gaze pierced through the crimson star representing the hermit and towards the ancient palace above the gray fog. Following that, his voice echoed in an unusually magnificent manner.
Long time no see.
A thought flashed through Klein's mind as he tensed up.
Long time no see. Long time no see. He knows the former owner of Sapphira Castle, the celestial worthy of heaven and earth for blessings? No, it should be him, a genie who claims to be eternal. He can actually use Ma'am Hermit's prayer to directly talk to me.
Based on his experience over the recent years, as well as his ability as a clown, his body suddenly relaxed, and he leisurely leaned back into his chair. Following that, Klein replied,
Huh.
He didn't give an affirmative answer, nor did he deny that he was a fake. He only showed a look of contempt and wore a supercilious look. The blurry golden figure harumphed.
You've actually been weakened so much. It's no wonder that I haven't heard of your honorific name in the past few millennia.
Amidst his thoughts, Klein smiled and said,
Honorific name. Weak. He really knows the former owner of Sapphira Castle. Is that an existence who was active during the first epoch? Cartus? What you see might not be the truth.
The twisted and blurry golden figure laughed and said,
Haha. You're still your usual self, always trying to scam others, but the condition of Sapphira Castle cannot fool me. Under normal circumstances, there's no way for me to pass through the outer layers of protection to communicate with you.
Klein asked in a relaxed manner.
How do you know that I didn't do it on purpose?
The distorted, blurry golden genie immediately replied,
There's no point in lying to me.
Using his lampooning to relieve the pressure in his heart, Klein smiled.
Why do I feel like the victim of fraud is saying that I'm penniless, to the point of having sold my kidney? Back then, what did the previous owner of Sapphira Castle, the one suspected to be the celestial worthy of heaven and earth for blessings, do to the genie? Part of the characteristics of this magic wishing lamp is that of a miracle invoker. Cool. It's not up to you to decide whether there's any point.
The blurry golden figure trembled slightly.
From the state of Sapphira Castle, you seem to have a need for a miracle invoker beyond her characteristic.
He did not harp on the topic and instead pointed out the situation he had observed. Klein's eyes narrowed as he nearly lost his composure.
This fellow can actually see through this matter. His level is really very high. He is able to separate the miracle invoker beyond her characteristic from the magic wishing lamp.
He immediately controlled his actions and expression and replied with a smile.
If you think so.
The blurry and distorted golden figure once again made his magnificent voice echo above the gray fog.
We can make a deal. You will remove my seal and give me freedom. I will leave the Miracle Invoker Beyonder characteristic to you and only take away the portion that belongs to me. As for a witness, let's use our Sephiroth. Although both you and I have means to resist the backlash and reduce the damage caused by breaching the contract, it won't be without a price. We both need to consider the consequences. I promise I won't stay here any longer than necessary.
With a thought, Klein quickly analyzed the viability of the matter.
Seal. Sephiroth. The terrifying nature of the magic wishing lamp is a seal of an existence that's at least at the true deity level.
Soon, he made a decision. He was not to be bewitched. There were two reasons for this. Firstly, he wasn't the real owner of Saphira Castle. There was a limit to what he could do and handle. Secondly, he had received some mysticism education and had gleaned experiences as a Nighthawk. He knew not to trade with unknown existences or bear any hope in being lucky. Having made up his mind, he calmed down and focused on how to gather more information. The Genie was suspected to originate from the darkest, most chaotic, and most mysterious first epoch, so he definitely knew a lot. After some thought, the corners of Klein's mouth curled up.
Do you think such conditions can move me?
He planned to see how high the chips the Genie could offer, so as to pry into certain of his secrets. Upon hearing this, the flickering golden figure's eyes suddenly lit up in a literal manner. His gaze seemed to land directly on Klein as his magnificent voice quaked the ancient palace like thunder.
You are not him.
At that moment, Klein was a little stunned and also a little frightened. It was as if he was performing a grand magic show only to have a member of the audience suddenly point out his trick. He didn't know what was wrong with his rhetorical question, nor did he know what exactly was wrong. It was difficult for him to analyze the pros and cons in a short period of time and give a reaction that matched the current situation.
Why did he suddenly realize that I'm not the former owner of Saphira Castle, the suspected celestial worthy of heaven and earth for blessings? Isn't my rhetoric question very reasonable? Since we're talking about a deal, bargaining should be allowed. The former owner of Saphira Castle that the Genie knew wasn't like that? Impossible. Why would a person who's good at deceit show his hand so readily? How can there not be some level of negotiation and pressure? *T. Too many thoughts are running through my mind. Nearly 10 seconds have passed. I didn't immediately answer the Genie's accusation, so it's a form of indirect admittance. When it came to being exposed, Klein didn't have much experience. He was momentarily unsure for a response.
Just as he raised his vigilance and was about to produce the Staff of the Stars and activate Saphira Castle's powers to resist the possible attack from the Genie, the golden and blurry figure suddenly laughed.
Ha 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 ha. Ha ha ha.
This laughter seemed to stir his soul, causing Klein, who was inside Saphira Castle, to nearly show signs of losing control. It wasn't easy for him to remain calm. Klein frowned as he thought of one possibility after another, but he felt that they didn't match reality.
There's no intention to attack, but the influence of natural dissipation. What's the Genie laughing about? What's so funny?
After a few seconds, the Genie's laughter stopped and he happily quipped,
Even for existences at our level, fate is still so miraculous. Regardless of who you are, the deal I proposed is still on the table. As long as you remove the seal and release me, I will return to the cosmos with the portion that belongs to me. As for the rest, I will leave the Miracle Invoker Beyonder characteristic to you. In addition, I will grant you 3 wishes. How's that? Isn't that enough?
When Klein heard that, his eyelids twitched as he sharply sensed danger.
Cosmos.
This was a warning from his spiritual intuition. He had originally thought that he could pretend to agree and obtain more information before using Saphira Castle to go back on his promise, but now he suddenly felt that he could not make the promise. Hence, Klein decisively said,
Leave.
As he spoke, he cut off the connection between himself and the crimson star representing the hermit. The blurry and distorted golden figure suddenly expanded and dissipated, leaving only his voice echoing.
You will eventually agree.
Only when the world above the gray fog had its calm completely restored did Klein slowly let out a breath and silently mutter to himself.
The genie is a powerful creature from the cosmos. Was it sealed within the magical wishing lamp in the first epoch or earlier? The person who sealed him might be the previous owner of Sapphira Castle, the existence suspected to be the celestial worthy of heaven and earth for blessings. This can be inferred from the ingredients used to form the magic wishing lamp's beyonder characteristics. So that's how the genie sensed that I wasn't the previous owner of Sapphira Castle when he questioned me? But I did consider this point, so my question wasn't logically unsound. Unless, back then, the former owner of Sapphira Castle and the genie had come to some sort of tacit understanding or had some secret. The bulk of the genie's powers likely can't extend out of the seal, but he can use the beyonder characteristic that forms the seal. The unique characteristic of granting wishes is likely from the miracle invoker characteristic. Then, the genie uses his level to magnify it.
Amidst his thoughts, Klein raised his head to look at the crimson star representing the hermit. He discovered that Catalina didn't notice anything unusual with the magic wishing lamp.
Phew.
Klein formed a stream of light that contained his warnings and threw it into the crimson star. Chapter 1242. The Baffling Actions of the Human. The primitive island that the Emperor found by chance. The creatures on the island worship an unknown power that comes from the cosmos. Without reaching the level of an angel, just knowledge of it will result in corruption from the cosmos. Try not to make a wish to the genie, nor bring it to that primitive island. Catalina finally received feedback from Mr. Fool as she heaved a sigh of relief, even more worried about the Queen's quest. She turned her head to look at the unresponsive magic wishing lamp and quickly put it away. Then, she spread out a letter, picked up a fountain pen, and paraphrased the information she had just received, hoping that Queen Mystic Bernadette would take it seriously. In a dilapidated apartment in Baffling, a man with a full beard was sitting on a chair, with his hands cuffed behind him. Gio, who had become a middle-ranking MI9 member through her own capabilities, stood in front of the man, with a triangular blade in hand and her two subordinates flanking her.
We already have enough witnesses and evidence to prove that you're one of the main organizers of the protest. If you wish to reduce your punishment, answer my questions honestly.
Before Gio could say a word, the bearded man felt an extremely powerful, suppressive force. When she finished speaking, even his mind began to tremble. It was as though bolts of electricity were generated, and a pain and numbness that couldn't be perceived could explode at any moment. The bearded man suppressed the fear and weakness in his heart and said,
"No one instigated me. I just did what I wanted to do. Don't you all know? The entirety of Backland has become a gunpowder keg. Even a tiny spark can set off the entire city. And there are countless sparks like me who are willing to take the risk. Those darn nobles and merchants hoarded so much food while there are already people in East Borough who are starving to death. You can do whatever you want to do to me. I've never believed in their promises. The reason why we agreed to end the protest was because everyone had received a lot of food."
Gio was about to ask further when she suddenly turned her head to listen to the commotion in the distance. Sounds of rumbling could be heard from somewhere. It was deep, hoarse, and layered.
Has the Faesak, Intis, or Fainapotter army broken through our defenses and begun to attack Backland's defenses?
Gio's expression instantly turned solemn. Back in the forsaken land of the gods, after Klein returned to the real world, he immediately attempted to reach out his hand to see if he could pull out the magic wishing lamp from the fog of history. Soon, he confirmed that he couldn't summon sealed artifact 0-05.
Indeed, it involves a uniqueness, or should I say, Sapphira. In short, the genie is indeed a high-ranking existence that was sealed. At the very least, he is a king of angels. There's no way to make use of him.
Klein let out a breath and turned his attention back to the hunt of dark demonic wolf Kotar. He had made a lot of preparations during this period of time, and he ran through and confirmed the plan above the gray fog. However, he was in no hurry to take action. He spent quite a bit of time checking the loopholes and mending the imperfections. 2 to 3 days later, it was dark and silent in the wilderness. Wearing a silk top hat and a long black trench coat, Klein held a lantern that emitted a faint yellow glow. With a solemn expression, he reached out his right hand and grabbed at the air. Masso? At that moment, a bolt of lightning streaked across the world, illuminating it. Following that, he dragged out a figure. It was him holding the illusory staff of the stars and a lantern. Right on the heels of that, his true body entered the fog of history as he dashed to a time before the first epoch. He hid inside the old stacked cities. His historical void projection suddenly came alive as an area that he had been exploring recently had surfaced in his mind. He used the power of the Staff of the Stars to directly move to it. This was a huge distance away from where his actual body was. Even if there was a problem with the projection, no one would be able to lock onto the exact location of where his true body was when he returned to reality. Surveying the area, he took in the dried riverbed and a boulder that stood deep in the darkness like a monster. He no longer maintained his Staff of the Stars historical projection, letting it quickly fade away and disappear with a shake of his right hand. After doing all of this, he walked to the boulder, put down the lantern, and began chanting an honorific name in Jotun.
The Dark Lord that exists alongside history, the embodiment of countless miracles, the god of wishes.
This was the dark demonic wolf's honorific name that he had obtained from the Evernight goddess. Although the mythical creature might not be using it anymore, or had perhaps changed it a long time ago, it was undoubtedly referring to him when it came to mysticism. Deep within a mountain range in an ancient castle, giants, elves, humans, and vampires each held the role as gardeners, chefs, servants, and guards. They all had different expressions and would whisper to each other when they met, making them appear lively and intelligent. However, once they returned to their rooms, they would immediately turn dull. Their eyes would no longer move as their bodies floated up and hung from the ceiling. In the depth of the castle, in a hall where only lightning could light it up from outside the window, a huge figure lay quietly in the darkness. Its body was like a tiny mountain that was covered in dark, short fur. Its pitch-black pupils covered at least 3/4 of its eyes, and at its forehead was a tuft of grayish-white fur. Its head resembled a magnified, twisted feral wolf. This was none other than the god of wishes, dark, demonic wolf Kotar. Suddenly, this demonic wolf, which was more exaggerated than an ordinary giant, raised his head. Every strand of his dark and short hair began to sway as all the servants in the castle followed his actions. Kotar's eyes moved slightly as he turned his head slightly, as though he was listening to something. In the next second, he opened his mouth and let out a soundless roar and summoned another hymn. As soon as this dark demonic wolf appeared, Kotar's body leaped into the grayish-white fog as he dashed to a certain historical spot of light in the second epoch. This was a piece of secret history that he knew. In the real world, the dark demonic wolf's historical void projection made a wish in a tongue-twisting language. Then, with a flash of his figure, he directly moved to a mountain near the northern city of Noise. After making the necessary preparations, the god of wishes allowed a strand of dark short hair to fall off, turning into an illusory worm of spirit that expanded into the corresponding prayer point of light. With its help, Kotar saw who was praying to him. It was a young man wearing a strange hat and strange clothes. He stood beside a glass lantern and softly chanted the honorific name of the god of wishes. The dark demonic wolf's huge, pitch-black pupils turned and saw that the young man was covered in a layer of grayish-white fog. There were some things that could not be seen clearly in the fog. As a Sequence 2 Angel of the Seer pathway, this mythical creature could clearly sense that the fog was similar to the fog of history. It could sense a strong attraction force from something in the fog.
Sapphira Castle?
Having heard some matters from the ancient god Phlegrea, the king of demonic wolves, he instantly had a guess. Under this premise, he had many thoughts regarding the young man.
Using Sapphira Castle to attract me and make me attack him on my own accord, and then confirming my location? This is a bait. Indeed, he's just a historical void projection. It's unknown which time fragment his true body is hiding in. It's unknown where the ambusher is hiding. Previously, Sapphira Castle clearly had an anomaly. I controlled myself and didn't attempt to search for the corresponding region or the clues that might be left behind. Why do they think I will fall for it? It's just an attempt, switching to another when it doesn't work? Or is there something wrong with this prayer? Hee, I've lived for thousands of years. After experiencing so many things, what kind of situation have I not seen? The best solution now is to ignore him and not spy on him. I'll just remember him.
The dark demonic wolf quickly made a decision and planned to observe for a while longer before destroying that prayer point of light, too. At this moment, he saw the young man open his mouth again.
The sun that is eternal. You are an inextinguishable light. You are the embodiment of order.
The dark demonic wolf was somewhat puzzled as to what the young man was trying to do.
In this forsaken land, praying to the other true deities was useless.
In the next second, Klein once again chanted another deity's name.
The Lord that created everything. The Lord who reigns behind the curtain of shadows. The degenerated nature of all living things.
The dark demonic wolf's pupils dilated slightly. He was confused by the actions of the human in the prayer light. Before he could make any guesses, Klein muttered the third honorific name.
The clock hand that tampers with time, the shadow that roams across fate, the embodiment of deceit and trickery.
Amen. He is praying to Amen.
The dark demonic wolf was already completely at a loss as to what the other party was up to. He instinctively felt that something was amiss and immediately wanted to wipe away the corresponding prayer point of light. Suddenly, he saw the young man lift his head and smile. He then took out a crystal monocle and put it on his right eye. In just one prayer, Klein's historical void projection had turned into blasphemer Amon's avatar. Almost at the same time, the dark demonic wolf felt the other party's gaze pass through the prayer light and land on him. Then Amon looked past him and into the fog of history where his true body was. Without any hesitation, he immediately destroyed the prayer light. As for his true body, he dispelled the gaze and removed the maintenance of the historical projection. In the fog of history, in the stacked city of old, Klein suddenly stood up. A scene surfaced in his mind. A few seconds before this scene took shape, he had severed the connection between his body and the historical void projection, doing so in order to avoid having Amen descend right beside him. The baffling actions that he had previously done were mainly to confuse the dark demonic wolf. He wanted him to continue observing after realizing that the supplicant wasn't the true body. This made him increase the time he spied on Sapphira Castle. In the end, he prayed to Amen, using the possible descent and influence of the god of deceit to hide the tracks of Sapphira Castle's reverse corruption of the dark demonic wolf. If Amen hadn't responded and merely watched by the sidelines, Klein would use the monocle he had prepared to deceive the dark demonic wolf. Chapter 1243. Hectic, but not confused. Deep within a mountain range in the ancient castle. As soon as dark demonic wolf Kotar returned from the fog of history, he instinctively removed all connections with the outside world. He was prepared to abandon this place and move elsewhere. Although he still hadn't figured out what had happened, with an accident already happening, his experience told him that he couldn't take any chances at all. He should retreat and give up as required of him. Asorkar Ahmas. At the same time, a thought came to Klein's mind in the city of old. His figure instantly appeared in the ancient palace above the gray fog. At the seat belonging to the fool, he merged with the constantly distorted and scattered crimson figure and took form. In this mysterious space, the crimson stars that represented justice, the hanged man, the star, and the other members of the tarot club were constantly expanding and shrinking. They emitted layers of ripples that formed a mighty wave. This was one of the preparations that Klein had made in advance. In the name of Gehrman Sparrow, he had used different reasons to get the members of the tarot club to pray to Mr. Fool one after another. asking this existence to pass a certain answer to Mr. World. As such, the crimson stars resonated, affecting Sapphira Castle in reverse, thus allowing it to summon the Fool to resolve the problem. This was one of the key factors that could help him escape from Amon's clutches. It could help him remove the need to take 4 steps counterclockwise and recite the incantations. He could directly enter Sapphira Castle without wasting any time. And in a battle at the level of angels, the difference a second makes would perhaps determine the difference in the outcome. To fight someone more powerful than him, Klein had to consider every detail. Sitting in the high-backed chair belonging to the Fool, he beckoned for the staff of the stars and sea god's scepter while observing the other changes in Sapphira Castle. In the grayish-white fog, there was an additional crimson glow that was rapidly shrinking, almost disappearing in no time. Around the Fool's seat, ripples of light bloomed as though they were forming a pure passageway. He could barely make out a gigantic demonic wolf's figure from the crimson glow. This was a result of Kotar's spying on Sapphira Castle. Through the passage of time, he had gained a certain understanding of the situation and had unknowingly been invaded. As such, he established a preliminary connection with Sapphira Castle. Of course, as an angel and a god of wishes of the second epoch, he had the right level and ability to sever such a connection and get rid of the corresponding corruption. If Klein didn't make use of these 1 or 2 seconds, he would lose his lock on the dark demonic wolf. And at the side of the Fool's seat, the rippling lights reflected the figure wearing a half-top hat and a long black trench coat, Gehrman Sparrow. On his right eye was a crystal monocle. Amon. It was unknown what loophole this blasphemer's avatar could use to slow down the rate at which Klein's historical void projection dissipated. Then he used the subtle connection between Gehrman Sparrow, Klein's actual body, and Sapphira Castle in an attempt to invade the world above the gray fog from the special scenes summoned by Sapphira Castle. As the halo spread out, Gehrman Sparrow's long and powerful palm pierced through the barrier and suddenly entered the ancient palace, as though it had opened an invisible door. Although Klein had already prepared for this and knew that it wouldn't be easy to get rid of Amon, he couldn't help but feel his scalp tingle when he saw this scene. He was afraid that in the next second he would grab a crystal monocle and put it on his right eye, and Pababu. This was something that had to be resolved in 1 or 2 seconds. Otherwise, the ownership of Sapphira Castle would be a question left in the air. Without any hesitation, distorted and transparent worms of spirit appeared on the surface of his skin. They quickly gathered together, forming another Klein. After catching the sea god's scepter, Klein stirred the power of Sapphira Castle. With the augmentation of the layers of invisible waves, the blue gems lit up, causing violent bolts of lightning to form silver balls that rolled into the rippling light. Amidst the crackling sounds, the palm that pierced through Sapphira Castle instantly shattered and evaporated. The spherical lightning that was filled with destructive aura expanded outwards, descending into reality, enveloping the monocled Gehrman Sparrow. This historical void projection was only barely maintained with the use of loopholes, so it collapsed after suffering such a strike. He could only adjust the crystal monocle and shake his head in regret as he watched his figure rapidly fade away after being shattered by the electric bolts. As a small portion of the worms of spirit responded to Amon's prayer, Klein grabbed the staff of the stars with his actual body. He held the staff embedded with many gems and aimed the Grade 0 sealed artifact at the rapidly shrinking crimson light. At the same time, a scene appeared in his mind. The rubies, emeralds, sapphires, and pearls on the staff of the stars lit up one after another. Gong. The sound of a distant bell seemed to have transcended an infinite amount of time as it echoed within the grayish-white fog, reverberating within the crimson light. The pitch-black darkness in front of dark demonic wolf Kotar suddenly faded, revealing a huge stone wall clock. The wall clock was ancient and mottled, and its surface was grayish-white and bluish-black, split into 12 segments. Each segment had different symbols that represented the different times of the day. At the core of the wall clock, 3 needles seemed to be formed from worms of time of 3 different lengths, short, medium, and long, were filled with a feeling that time had left its mark on. This was a beyonder power from Angel of Time, Amon. Using the Staff of the Stars, Klein had made it appear again. Normally speaking, a beyonder power at this level wasn't something that could be understood by just witnessing once or twice. It wasn't so easy to record it, but Klein wasn't fighting alone. During this period of time, he had made use of Miss Magician's summoning to return to Baffling frequently. He went to the Star Leonard to chat directly with Palez Zoroast, and he gained a deeper understanding of the corresponding mysticism knowledge and supernatural details. Although Palez had already dropped to the Sequence 2 level and was unable to use the powers of the time domain, his experience and knowledge remained. Gong. On the ancient mysterious stone wall clock, the second hand suddenly jerked, causing everything around Dark Demonic Wolf Kotar to slow down. Even the deep darkness seemed to freeze. This miracle invoker, who was just about to completely cut off contact with the outside world and distance himself from where he was by granting his own wish, suddenly froze on the spot. There was a brief moment of him being fixed in place. There was no doubt that there was a huge gap in power between the original Beyonder powers and those replicated by the Staff of the Stars. However, for Klein, the effect was already enough. The moment he saw the dark demonic wolf being affected by the ancient wall clock, he immediately dropped the Staff of the Stars and made the worm of spirit he had just separated from his body to fly back into his body. With a thought, he returned to the City of Oil before the first epoch. Then, he appeared in the dark, desolate plains with the lantern that emitted a faint yellow glow. His right hand extended forward and successfully pulled out a projection of the Staff of the Stars. This method could effectively increase the success rate of summoning the Staff of the Stars, but it would clearly reduce the might of this Grade 0 sealed artifact. After all, he was summoning a historical projection of a historical projection. Of course, as it was a race against time, making such a choice was very easy. Klein didn't enter the fog of history again. He reached out to grab his shoulder, and he used dream divination to outline the feedback he received from using Sapphira Castle to reverse corrupt the dark demonic wolf. In the dark, unlit hall in the ancient castle, the mountain-like demonic wolf stood up. Quickly filling in the details, Klein slightly adjusted the details according to the scene of his frozen target. On the black staff, the corresponding gems lit up. In his mind, the scene that resembled an oil painting suddenly swelled up, interweaving with reality, making it impossible to separate from each other. He descended into that ancient castle's dark hall, landing in front of dark demonic Wolf Kotar, who had just raised his body with his 8 legs. He had finally officially met the god of wishes that had been living since the second epoch. Without any hesitation, Klein took the opportunity of the dark demonic wolf, having just escaped the influence of the ancient wall clock. As he dispelled the historical void projection, he took out an iron cigar case from his pocket and opened it. Inside the cigar case, there was a Lowen gold coin. Its surface flashed, reflecting Renette Tinneker, who was wearing a dark and complicated long dress and holding 4 blonde red-eyed heads. One of the preparations Klein made was to use the method that he had used to bring around Admiral of Blood Senior. This allowed him to bring Miss Messenger to the forsaken land of the gods. Renette Tinneker was no doubt a wraith. Furthermore, she was an even more powerful wraith. She could also possess the smooth surface of a gold coin. In addition, she was a spirit world creature and was intrinsically a spirit. She could enter the world above the gray fog and descend upon the forsaken land of the gods, just like Justice Audrey. Based on this condition, in order to not expose the secret within Sapphira Castle and not expose the fool's true identity, he first made Miss Messenger possess the gold coin before using the iron cigar case to seal it. Then, he sacrificed the item to the gray fog before bringing it to the forsaken land of the gods through a bestowment ritual. Of course, the prerequisite for these actions was that Klein had the level and strength of a Sequence 2 angel in Sapphira Castle. Even if something went wrong with Renette Tinneker, he could still handle it. As for Renette Tinneker, she happily agreed to this matter because Gehrman Sparrow had just helped her retrieve a portion of her body. Silently, Miss Messenger left the gold coin and occupied the pitch-black pupil of the dark demonic wolf's eyes. Wraith's Possession. Chapter 1244. Wish. Just as Renette Tinneker's figure appeared in dark demonic Wolf Kotar's pupils, she left the window to the heart and began expanding back to her original size. This meant that her wraith's possession attempt had failed. The dark demonic wolf's body rapidly shrunk and thinned as he madly absorbed the light around him, becoming a translucent black velvet curtain. This was an item that Klein had seen via dream divination. It was ejected from the grayish-white fog and had landed in the hands of the dark demonic wolf. It was suspected to contain the sequence 1 attendant of mysteries beyond or characteristic of the seer pathway. At this moment, dark demonic wolf Kotar had borrowed some of the powers of the curtain to dodge Renette Tinneker's wraith's possession at the critical moment via some unknown means, effectively avoiding the subsequent series of control. The curtain was stowed away after he used it, allowing the dark demonic wolf with his dark short fur to appear in a spot that was originally empty. Renette Tinneker wasn't surprised by the failure. Taking advantage of this opportunity, a golden-haired, red-eyed head in her hand spat out a rectangular, diamond-like charm. The other 3 heads used ancient Hermes, Jotun, and Elvish to say a word.
Yesterday.
The rectangular, diamond-like charm was instantly engulfed in transparent flames as it fused with the void. Renette Tinneker's body swelled as the 4 blonde, red-eyed heads flew up and landed on her empty neck, stacked upon one another. In the blink of an eye, Miss Messenger had transformed into a huge doll that could almost break through the dark demonic wolf's castle. She was wearing a black Gothic dress with countless mysterious symbols and sinister vines. Her eyes were blood red, and she exuded an aura that no human should possess. Dark demonic wolf Kotar didn't attempt to stop Renette Tinneker from borrowing strength from her past, nor did he immediately show his complete mythical creature form. With 8 feet on the ground, he raised his neck and let out a roar. This roar seemed to be of a higher level, containing words similar to Jotun. It made the curtain float up and instantly expand, blanketing the ancient castle from top to bottom. The curtain quickly turned transparent and fused with the building. It was as though it had never appeared or had any effect on it. However, Klein's spiritual intuition told him that this place was already isolated from the outside world. If he wanted to leave, he had to first break the invisible barrier. In other words, that curtain made the dark demonic wolf's castle become an independent kingdom. This was the embryonic form of a divine kingdom. Klein, who had just failed and planned on continuing to summon angels to help him, had a spark of inspiration. He instantly changed his mind, reaching into the void and dragging out another hymn. It was Gehrman's Sparrow, one who was holding a historical projection of the Staff of the Stars. Right on the heels of that, Klein controlled his historical projection to turn him into his marionette and transfer some worms of spirit over. While he was busy with these matters, Renette Tinneker had already recovered to her peak condition. Her bright red eyes reflected the 8-legged demonic wolf. With a faint flash, the dark demonic wolf turned into a white goat. However, outside the dark hall, a giant holding a broom suddenly trembled and transformed into a demonic wolf with a tuft of gray hair on its forehead. At the moment when the curse was cast on him, a miracle invoker, he had swapped places with his marionette. He opened his mouth once again and let out a roar. This roar also contained words that mostly resembled the source of Jotun, describing a beautiful wish.
I wish for all godhood here to dissipate.
In the next second, as the god of wishes, the dark demonic wolf granted his wish. Klein immediately felt his godhood being repressed. The beyonder powers that stemmed from Scholar of Yore and Bizarro Sorcerer could no longer be used. Fortunately, the historical projection was maintained with spirituality. As long as the summoning was successful, it wouldn't be dispelled by the dark demonic wolf's wish. Similarly, as Klein had already turned his historical projection into a marionette and transferred a number of worms of spirit over, he could still swap locations with his projection. Apart from him, Renette Tinneker and Dark Demonic Wolf were also affected by the wish that had been granted. Their beyonder powers above Sequence 5 had vanished into thin air, making it difficult to use them. Of course, be it the demonic wolf marionette that had turned into a goat, or the gigantic doll-like Renette Tinneker, there was no change in their form. What existed was reasonable, so it couldn't be eliminated by the power of wishes. After making this wish, the dark demonic wolf arched his back and bent his body slightly. It looked like he was about to engage in a battle with Klein and Renette Tinneker. At that moment, his mountain-like body was about the size of the castle-like doll. He looked down coldly at Klein, capable of crushing him with a single swipe of his claw. In addition, the castle had many marionettes rushing over. They consisted of giants, elves, vampires, humans, and deformed monsters. Only a number of them were at sequence 5. But now, they had Kotar's worms of spirit in their bodies. In other words, in this special environment, all of them were at sequence 5. After the dissipation of godhood, in this independent kingdom, dark demonic wolf Kotar's advantage became obvious. More than 100 sequence 5s were besieging 2 sequence 5s. Furthermore, the dark demonic wolf was itself a mutant. Even if he couldn't reveal any godhood, his massive size and terrifying strength made him adept at combat. He wasn't on the same level as a weak human like marionettist Klein. At this moment, the body of Renette Tinneker, who was dressed in a black Gothic dress that twined with sinister vines, suddenly turned incorporeal. First, she reflected on a floor-to-ceiling window. Then it jumped into the pitch-black pupils of the dark demonic wolf. She had once again attempted Wraith's possession. However, dark demonic wolf Kotar swapped locations with another marionette in a timely fashion, preventing Renette Tinneker from successfully possessing his body. Renette Tinneker wasn't discouraged as she continued using mediums such as glass windows, chandeliers, and eyeballs to jump through the different marionettes in pursuit of the real dark demonic wolf. As for the dark demonic wolf, he relied on his numerous marionettes and had the advantage of copious numbers of worms of spirit. He swapped between different marionettes without any pause to avoid being forcibly possessed by the ancient bane. Amidst the two angels' silent conflict, a large number of the dark demonic wolf's marionettes had surrounded the two Kleins. Beyond her powers, like a vampire's abyss shackles, a giant's hurricane of light, an elf's wind binding, and a human's psychic piercing and holy light summoning, inundated their targets. They controlled, weakened, attacked, and purified Klein, acting with great rapport. Klein was only able to dodge a portion of the attacks before being drowned by the attacks. Plasma exploded as the light blasted out. Klein's staff of the stars holding figure quickly outlined itself to the side. At that critical moment, he had exchanged spots with his marionette in time. He imagined his traveling powers and had used the Staff of the Stars to complete the teleportation. In this special scenario, this was essentially a release of recorded powers. After dodging this round of attacks, Klein discovered that a marionette was controlling his spirit body threads before he could catch his breath. At the same time, a human marionette reached out his right hand, under the influence of the dark demonic wolf, and aimed at the miracle invoker's actual body. In the next second, the dark demonic wolf and another marionette switched positions. As for the marionette, it was possessed by Renette Tinneker. This way, the human marionette's right hand was targeted at Renette Tinneker. The marionette's palm clenched tightly as his wrist spun half a circle, stealing away the target's subsequent thoughts. Right on the heels of that, he jumped and pounced on an ally. Renette Tinneker was momentarily rooted to the ground. When the dark demonic wolf saw this, he immediately got several marionettes to spread open their arms and summon pure pillars of cleansing flames to surround them. In the holy light, Wraith Renette Tinneker's body first began to melt. Following that, using mirror jump, she moved to a glass window situated high above the castle to avoid the subsequent purification. In just a few seconds, she and Klein inevitably fell into a perilous situation. The restricted environment, being on his home ground, and his trait as the god of wishes, had magnified dark demonic wolf Kotar advantage to the extreme. If it were any other scholar of yore, there was only one problem he needed to consider: how to rely on Renette Tinneker to escape. But Klein had his trump card. Just as he pulled back his spirit body threads, he didn't hesitate to stir the powers of Sapphira Castle. This trait of his wasn't suppressed by the dark demonic wolf's wish. This was something even the forsaken land of the gods couldn't screen. In midair, grayish-white fog appeared. The ancient palace above the spirit world appeared faint. Its appearance brought with it slight tremors. A certain power followed the connection and shook the demonic wolf's castle, causing the translucent black velvet curtain to jolt out of place a little, allowing the independent kingdom to intersect with reality. Seizing this opportunity, Klein opened his mouth and shouted out a name in Jotun.
Leodero.
Boom! 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 Thousands of thick silver lightning bolts descended from the sky, smiting dark demonic Wolf Kotar's castle. The area transformed into a lightning forest that emitted a strong, destructive aura. Chapter 1245. Help available even without summoning help. Boom, boom, boom. The bolts of silver lightning that were as thick as an anaconda struck the translucent black velvet curtain. It shook violently as it distorted. Taking advantage of this opening, Renette Tinneker's figure, which was reflected on the castle's glass, jumped back into Klein's pocket and returned to the surface of the gold coin in the iron cigar case. The prepared Klein raised his right arm and calmly aimed the staff of the stars at the floor tiles in the hall. A scene surfaced in his mind. It represented one of the beyonder powers of a druid. The ground beneath his feet instantly softened, turning into a marsh. It made his body sink like it had fallen into a sea. Underground slink! Boom! The translucent black velvet curtain could no longer withstand the cleansing from the lightning storm the moment the marsh solidified. It curled into a ball and fell back into the castle. No longer restricted, the few thousand thick bolts of lightning rained down the ancient castle. A tower collapsed, and the hall was left in shambles. One marionette after another burst into ephemeral illusions under the pricking of such a lightning strike. They were instantly charred black and reduced to ashes. When the silver light that illuminated the entire mountain range subsided, dark demonic Wolf Kotar's castle was in ruins. Many spots were burning with red flames. Klein immediately emerged from the bottom of a deep pit and saw that the demonic wolf, covered in dark and short fur, had performed the same action. Relying on the 3 druids among his marionettes, he had successfully hidden underground to avoid the lightning bombardment. And at that moment, the independent kingdom created by the curtain had completely disintegrated. However, the dark demonic wolf's wish hadn't completely expired. The return of godhood still needed some time. Without any hesitation, both parties engaged in another intense battle. Kotar allowed the crinkled curtain to fly up and drape him, so as to prevent the wraith's possession. After all, there were only 3 of his marionettes left. Of course, this way, he could no longer swap locations with his marionettes. At the same time, Renette Tinneker left the gold coin in Klein's pocket and floated towards the 8-legged demonic wolf. She had given up on the idea of possession as her arms suddenly swelled. A few strands of gray hair grew from the back of her hand, and her nails became long, sharp, and firm. Werewolf transformation. This doll-like, baneful entity became a huge werewolf. She kept moving at high speeds, waving her sharp claws as she engaged in an intense battle with the hill-like, dark, demonic wolf. Amidst the clashing sounds, Klein was attacked by Kotar's 3 remaining marionettes. One of them raised his head and roared, causing brown, short hair to tear through his clothes. In an instant, he transformed into a terrifying giant bear that was twice the height of a person. One crouched down, pressing his palms against the ground, while the other raised his right hand and yanked his hair. At that moment, a crimson flame surged out of Klein's clothes, instantly devouring him. His figure appeared in a sea of flames to the side. Then he jumped out, raised his staff, and charged straight at the huge brown bear. And at the spot where he was originally standing, dark green mutated vines pierced through the ground and grew wildly, stirring the remnant flames in the middle. Tap, tap, tap. The huge brown bear didn't back down. With heavy strides, it rushed towards Klein like a high-speed steam locomotive. It spread open its arms, trying to give him a passionate hug that could crush all his bones and squeeze all his chest muscles together. Tap, tap, tap. As his black trench coat flailed to his back, Klein didn't retreat. He was about to collide with the huge brown bear. Suddenly, he kicked his left foot and twisted his waist. He forcefully jumped up and flew past the brown bear diagonally. Thud. As the two crossed each other, Klein swung his black staff down and ruthlessly struck the brown bear's shoulder. Normally, such an attack wouldn't have been able to hurt the thick hide of the brown bear. However, with the Staff of the Stars, the physical attack would lead to random abnormal changes or strange effects. Of course, under the God of Wishes' suppression, these changes and effects wouldn't exceed that of a Sequence 4 Beyonder power. Thud. As the sound of the staff's strike reverberated, the huge brown bear's shoulder tore open diagonally from its shoulder. The bottom half of its torso teleported more than 10 meters away, while the remaining portion remained in place. The brown bear's internal organs and blood gushed to the ground in a rather shocking scene. However, the brown bear wasn't dead yet. Its two halves were squirming as it struggled to stabilize his center of mass and continued attacking. As a marionette, he had long died. Such damage was nothing. At this moment, Klein had already jumped behind the brown bear, his feet stepping on the ground. Another wave of scarlet flame surged out, drowning his figure. A flame that was about to be extinguished rose up as Klein leaped out and arrived close to the marionette, which had both hands on the ground. With his silk top hat, he ran past the marionette, without turning his head, as he swung the staff to the side. Thud! The marionette's body burst into golden flames as his figure instantly vanished. Hell! A flame surged into the sky as the marionette jumped down. However, the golden flames didn't extinguish, quickly burning him to ashes. Without even looking over, Klein had already rushed in front of the marionette that was yanking his hair. The marionette immediately threw out the hair in his hand. These strands of hair began to burn as they emitted black gases, sounding alarms to Klein's spirituality senses.
Poison. An unknown poison.
With a creak, he forcefully stopped using his ability as a clown. Using the inertia of his body, he extended his black staff. All sorts of thoughts rapidly reformed in his mind, quickly forming a scene. Before this operation, Klein had requested Miss Justice's help to hypnotize him. It made his brain unable to form scenes when he subconsciously thought of one. There would only be a single thought resonating in his mind, and he had to take the initiative to control it to construct the scene. This allowed him to use the Staff of the Stars for a long time without being affected by the negative effects. As for the flaws of thinking in such a manner, Klein felt that it was still acceptable under predetermined conditions. Without a sound, the gems embedded in the Staff of the Stars lit up. A pure white and holy pillar of light descended from the sky, enveloping the black gas and the corresponding marionette. The poison quickly melted under the sun's burning. It was the same with the marionette. With a remnant glow still in his eyes, Klein instinctively turned around and aimed his staff at the brown bear that was split into two. Silver lightning flashed spontaneously before the separated brown bear's body finally collapsed, unable to get up again. In just a few seconds, Klein had finished off the remaining marionettes of the dark demonic wolf. After Saphira Castle's anomaly, be it him or the God of Wishes, time became abnormally precious. No one was willing to stall for time, because it wouldn't be long before high-level existences like the True Creator and Angel of Time Amon in the Forsaken Land of the Gods descended. Upon seeing this, dark demonic Wolf Kotar trembled violently and flung out the translucent velvet curtain. The curtain first vanished into thin air before it suddenly appeared behind Klein. Just as his spirituality was about to send a warning, it covered him and wrapped him within it. Klein's vision immediately darkened as he felt his thoughts turn sluggish. His spirit-body threads were being inoculated onto the curtain, one thread at a time. He attempted using Flaming Jump, softening his bones, and using the Staff of the Stars, but he was unable to succeed in such an abnormal state. The black velvet curtain became tighter and tighter, revealing the corresponding marks of his eyes, nose, and mouth, as though it was squeezing out a brand new person. Renette Tinakir immediately jumped and appeared on the translucent curtain, purging it from Klein's body and teleporting elsewhere. The dark demonic wolf seized the opportunity and raised his neck, letting out a roar. The curtain stood up as if it had become a cloak draped over an invisible person's body. A terrifying suction force was born, causing the spirit body threads of Renette, Tinneker, and Klein to uncontrollably float over. If they didn't have the corresponding Beyonder powers, their spirit body threads would have merged into the cloak in just 3 to 4 seconds, while they would become its marionettes. Fortunately, Klein was a marionettist himself. He immediately focused his attention and controlled his and Miss Messenger's spirit body threads. He followed the method that he learned from Zaratul, allowing them to circle around him and return to their original positions, forming loops. Roar! The dark demonic wolf spat out a gas ball, sending it flying towards Klein like a cannonball. As he was focused on controlling his and Miss Messenger's spirit body threads, Klein could barely duck. Just as he was about to be struck, Renette Tinneker floated over and stood in front of him. Boom! Renette Tinneker's blonde hair scattered as the evil vines wrapped around. Her body broke apart. The dark demonic wolf's follow-up actions were one smooth, continuous series of actions. Taking advantage of the moment when the curtain was desperately pulling at its target's spirit body threads, he launched repeated attacks on Klein, forcing Renette Tinneker to block them. It caused the tough ancient Bane to tremble under the attack of his claws, air blobs, and flaming attacks. More and more wounds appeared, making it look like she could not last any longer. At this critical moment, as Klein controlled the spirit body threads to resist the attraction of the curtain, he reached into his pocket and took out another iron cigar case. The seal was removed and the box was opened. Inside, there was also a gold coin lying quietly. There was also a wraith on the surface of the gold coin. This was a blurry female wraith, a true undying creature, and not a wraith from the mutant pathway. It was the strongest trump card that Klein had prepared. Previously, because he was inside the isolated kingdom that wasn't connected to the outside world. He was afraid that he wouldn't be able to obtain the desired effect. Only when the curtain targeted him and Miss Messenger did he feel that the opportunity was here. As the box was opened, the wraith suddenly jumped onto the surface of a glass fragment. On it were nearly illusory black tubes that extended into infinity, connecting to the unknown. This was the symbol of artificial death. And artificial death was equivalent to the Evernight Goddess. This trump card of his was the reenactment of the time when the Evernight Goddess had used God of Glory Bledel's corpse to foil Aemon's attempt to snatch Sapphira Castle. For this, he deliberately found a wraith-like monster in the forsaken land of the gods and imprisoned it, placing it together with the artificial death project's white feathers he summoned from the fog of history. Through his repeated experiments and prayers during his specific trips to Backland, this wraith had finally established a certain connection with artificial death, allowing the Evernight Goddess to use this opportunity to exert a rather low level of influence.